Hello, my name is Jayla McMurray, and I will be doing my midterm project on the suppression of the black votes. So, when we talk about the ways America has denied and prevented black Americans from being able to vote, we have to think about just after the Civil War. So, after the Civil War, places like Louisiana granted white, illiterate, and poor Americans the right to vote, while denying poor, illiterate black Americans the right to vote, based on whether their grandfather could vote. Hence the term grandfathered in. And of course, because virtually everyone's grandfather was enslaved, they were unable to vote. Therefore, many black Americans couldn't vote, with the exception of a rare few. Backtracking a little bit, in 1787, the Constitution considered black people to be 3/5 of a human being. So at this time, black voting was not an issue. Then came the Civil War and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and black men got the right to vote. And over 2,000 black men were elected into government offices. And then they started purchasing property and voting. America responded to this, and taking it back to the 13th Amendment, there was an exception that allowed for slavery as a punishment for crime. And this sort of prompted and created black laws or black codes, which basically criminalized black life, which limited the freedom of black Americans that were newly freed. And those black people who were convicted under these black laws or black codes were leased out for very cheap labor, which helped to boost the South's fluctuating economy. In 1850, about 2% of prisoners were not white. And in 1870, that rose all the way up to 74%. And 90% of those people were African American. In the 15 years between 1865 and 1880, more than 13 states enacted broad felony disenfranchisement laws. And the theory was very simple. You convict black Americans of crimes, you strip their right of way to vote, you imprison them, and then lease them out for very cheap labor, therefore putting them in a position that is nearly the same as slavery. And now for my second point in regards to the Jim Crow era, which had many legal systems of racial discrimination in place, such as poll taxes, police power, and white terrorism. And firstly, with poll taxes, a poll tax is a tax that you had to pay to be able to vote. And at one point in time, state and local poll taxes were very common until the mid-20th century, when it was mainly limited to the South as a means to prevent blacks and white poor people from being able to vote. These taxes were about $2 to $5. In today's term, that would be about $15. And to a lot of people, that might not seem like a lot, but to an impoverished family that relies on government commodity, that's like choosing between voting and providing the necessities of life for your family. The various state, county, and local police forces routinely intimidated and harassed black people who tried to register to vote. They arrested would-be voters on false charges and beat them on imaginary transgressions, and often that type of retribution wasn't only directed at the men and women who tried to register to vote, but also their families, and that also included children. Lastly, if economic pressure didn't work, the Ku Klux Klan was ready with violence and mayhem, ranging from cross burning, night riders, beatings, rapes, church bombings, arson of black businesses and homes, mobs, lynchings, drive-by shootings, sniper assassinations. Today, these people will be called terrorists. And even today, some people wouldn't call it for what it was. But back then, white establishments saw them as defenders of quote-unquote the southern way of life and upholders of quote-unquote our glorious southern heritage. And now for my last point. This is a trend that continues even now. This year alone, about 10 counties with large black populations in Georgia closed polling spots after a white election consultant recommended them to do so to save money. And the number of polling places in a county can have significant impacts on who does and does not vote. And changing the location of a polling place, according to 2011 study and the American Political Science Review, can lower voter turnout. In addition to that, Black Americans of voting age are 4 times as likely to lose their right to vote than the rest of the adult population. 1 in every 13 Black adults is disenfranchised. In some states like Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and until recently Florida, 1 in 5 Blacks have been disenfranchised. In total, 2.2 million Black citizens are banned from voting. And that is 38% of the disenfranchised population in America, which is Black. But there are 2 states that allow for people who are incarcerated to vote, and those 2 states are Vermont and Maine, which happen to be 2 of the whitest states in our country. In most states, incarcerated people are denied the right to vote, but they are counted as the population, and often these are white and rural districts. And what this does is boost the electoral advantages that these districts have. A study conducted in 2003 found that the larger the state's Black population, the more likely the state was to pass strict laws that permanently denied people convicted of crimes the right to vote. And with all that said, the suppression of the Black vote has been something that has existed from when we were first granted the right to vote, and something that exists today. And of course, we can't change the past, but there are definitely things that we can do to help aid that problem. And I think part of that is acknowledging what has happened and the limitations that have been placed upon Black people for generations. And I think a step in the right direction is restoring the voting right to people who have been imprisoned. And I think that's very consistent with the values that America insists that we do live upon. So, that's all I have for my midterm project. So, thank you for watching.